Welcome to The Author Next Door, where hosts Angela Haas and Cassie Newell chat about the wild world of writing and publishing. Join them for weekly episodes and special monthly guests. Pull up a chair. The conversation starts now.
Welcome to episode 44. I'm Angela Haas, and I'm here with my co-host, Cassie Newell. And this month, we're exploring different perspectives in writing. Today, we're talking with author Ivan Scott. Ivan Scott's road to being a published author is sometimes as crazy as the stories he writes. Scott has written ever since he was in elementary school and finally was able to put together 3 books, all romantic fiction, that look at the romance we have for each other as well as for life. I love that. He has dyslexia, so that is a struggle at times with his writing, but he tells his 2 children, whom both have dyslexia too, never use your challenges as an excuse. Use them to achieve greatness. His first book was rejected 303 times. Oh my. But he didn't take no for an answer, decided to self-publish, and has never looked back. Writing the story, formatting it, creating the cover, and doing all the marketing seemed like a daunting task. But as he says, when you have the passion for persistence, nothing is impossible. He lives with his beautiful, saucy redhead wife, 2 troublemaking kids, and a rat terrier named Beasley in the Atlanta suburb of Sandy Springs. Welcome, Ivan. It's so great to have you.
It is great to be here. I am so happy to talk to you guys. I feel like all week long, I was like, I cannot wait to get on this podcast and talk to you guys because we had so much fun in our email interactions and everything. So I'm like, the podcast is going to be 20 times better. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So for listeners who are just discovering you, tell us a little bit about your writing journey. That's a little bit more detailed than in the bio. How did you always want to be a writer? Was that always part of your career, or have you been on different paths?
yeah, it's funny because like you were talking about in the bio, I can remember in 3rd grade, I was writing stories about what was going on in the classroom. And I didn't know why or whatever. I just knew that I'd like to do it. And then as I got older, I would find myself writing stories about my rec league baseball team and some of the crazy characters and some of the crazy things that we would do and all that. And then I kind of always had the writing bug. And then it just finally hit me. It was like, you know what? One day you're not going to be able to do this. So take advantage of the opportunity that you have now. And get your thoughts and get, the crazy things that go on in the world and in your world and your friend's world and all that. Get those down because, once those moments leave, they're gone forever. And so I think that's one of the things that appealed to me about writing is that like for instance, and we'll get into this a little bit more when we talk about, my wife, Red is what I call us, her nickname. Her name is Kim. But some of the silly things that go on between us, it's like, man, I want to write that down and I want to make sure that we remember that. And I'm sure that the people that are listening to the podcast and even you guys will be like, wow, I'm glad that I have this in a book because I can always go back to this memory and relive it again. It's not gone, after I forget about it. So I think that was one of the things about writing that's always appealed to me. Then finally, like I said, one day I'm like, you know what? Let's get serious and let's do this because you're going to regret not taking this opportunity while you had the chance. And through all the rejections and all the disappointments and, wondering, gosh, am I good enough to do this and all that, it's like, hey, just do it. Because like I said, one day you're going to look back on it and say, wow, I wish I would have done this when I had the chance. And hopefully for a lot of us, we never have to live with that regret because that's something you can never get back.
I was going to ask you a little bit about the dyslexia side of things, because dyslexia, if I understand this correctly, it's a misplacing of words. It can be jumbled in a certain way, forward and backward, or even just the middle. So I'm kind of curious, like, how did you overcome that as a writer?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was growing up, I had trouble in school, and my father, I mean, this is just the old school way. He would just hit me in the head and say, "Try harder. You're not trying hard." And it's like,
Right.
Dad, the words are jumping on the page, and I don't understand, the math part of this and the English part of this and all that.
Hmm.
And then I just thought it was just something that, I'm just not as smart as other people are. And it was interesting because it was kind of like an epiphany in a way when I got to college. I was like, God, why does college feel so much easier than high school? And then it hit me. It's like in high school, for a lot of high school, it's okay. a multiple choice test or okay, math test, 12 plus 12 equals 24, whatever. But in college, a lot of the questions were, okay, describe what the feeling was when this character did this, or describe in history
Mm,
what happened here. And so I could kind of be creative and visualize the question in my mind instead of it being kind of black and white. And that's one of the things that I found
oh,
in the journey,
interesting.
with especially with our kids, is it's like you're not. It's not like you're less intelligent than anybody else, but it's like a roadmap. It's like okay, some people will on a roadmap. I'm going to go from A to B. But with me and when with people with dyslexia, it's like, okay, I need to go to B, but I'm going to start at A, but I'm going to go to C first, then I'm going to go to D, then I'm going to go to E, then I'm going to go to G, and then I'm going to get to B. So it's kind of like your way
Interesting.
to get to the destination. And it's not right or wrong, or it's not that you're not as smart as anybody else, but it's just the way that you process and the way that you get to where that you want to be. And just watching my children or our children go through that, it's like, oh my God, that was me. I get it now. I understand.
Yeah.
Mm,
You
and
have the
yeah,
empathy for it.
absolutely. It's just yeah, it's just crazy when you look back on it. It's like, wow, okay, I get it now. The other thing that's interesting is, and as a writer, um, our bread and butter are words. We have to write words down, and we have to communicate, and we have to, paint a picture and that kind of thing. And I know a lot of times, especially with my dyslexia, when I try to spell a word, and thank God for spell check, because if it wasn't for spell check, I would not be a writer. Nobody could even understand my books,
Right.
let alone try to read them. So I know that with a lot of times as I was growing up, I would think about a word and I wouldn't know how to spell it. And then it's like, okay, what's the easier way to spell this word? And I would find a different word that I knew how to spell. So right there, it was like, wow, I never realized that I did this, but it was just one of those things that I did. I was like, okay, I can't spell this word. Let me find a different word and then use that word in a sentence or in trying to convey what I was trying to mean.
It's exciting. I love that because, you know, even as a decent speller, I'm still that person late at night that's like Wednesday. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to think about it. It's
Yep.
but spell check is definitely worthwhile. So it's
Yes.
interesting. I was curious too. Do you dictate when you're drafting or are you typing things out visually? I'm kind of curious.
Sure. I wish, and I have them all in my closet. I have my books here, as props in case you guys ask about the books. I should have brought out my notebooks because okay. Just goes to show you, this is just the way that I do it. But I take notebooks and I write the stories in the notebooks because, again, with my brain, it's like I have to be able to write in different colors. I have to be able to
Oh,
draw boxes. I have to be able to write notes in the margins, or draw arrows, or make little notations, whatever. And what I found, I was like, why do I like to do it like that? Or why do I feel comfortable doing it like that? And I think it's because when I type from scratch or when I start cold on a laptop, I feel so boxed in. It's like, okay, everything
Mhm.
is like,
interesting.
yeah, and it's like the fonts are very neat and they're very, in order and all that. And I found that I have to, like we were talking about, have to kind of think outside the box. Instead of going from A to B, I have to go roundabout way. So I write everything in notebooks. I have all my notes in the notebooks as well. And then when I'm ready to put it into the laptop, then I will just take the notebook, look at it and then type from there. But like you were talking about with the dictation, thank goodness for Google Docs because that used to take so long to
Yeah.
do. But now what I do is I go into Google Docs and use the speech to text feature. And so I
Yeah.
will read it. And obviously it's not 100% accurate, but it's much quicker than I used to be able to, or used
Typing
to.
it all out. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And so everything is in notebooks and then it goes to the laptop. And then from there, I use three different editors, the Hemingway app. And we'll get into
Yeah.
Hemingway, I guess, in a minute, because that's kind of my mentor.
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
that I could, not that I could write like Hemingway. Gosh, not many people could, but or can. But I use the Hemingway app because that takes out a lot of those. I think they call them lazy words. A lot of adjectives and a
Sticky
lot of words
words.
that really kind of
Yeah.
bog down your sentence. So I run like I have to do it chapter by chapter. So I run the first chapter through that, and then after I get the final from the Hemingway app, I throw it into Grammarly, and then after Grammarly, then I put it into Pro Writing Aid, and then after all that, then it goes back to the laptop, and then like you were talking about with the dictation, what I like to do is I click on an option, and it'll speak it back to you, and when I can hear it, yeah. Okay, so that's and so it's like because I could read it a million times and I will make a million mistakes. It's like, why didn't I see that period? Or why didn't I see that double word? But when you listen to it and it comes back to you, it's like, wait a minute, that didn't
You
sound
can
right. Let me
catch
listen
it.
to it again. And that is such a big help. So that's kind of like that's my writing process. And it's crazy.
That's really
But
great.
the other thing about that that's really kind of cool though is that I can go back and pull out those notebooks, and it's like having a blueprint, like, to a house or to a building. It's like, "Wow, I remember when I wrote this paragraph, and I
Mm,
remember when I changed this and all that." So I kinda have, like, a historical artifact of, "Wow, this is
I
where,"
love that.
like like this book, like, I can like, this is my last book, and so it's like I can go back to the notebook, and I could say, "Wow, I can remember when, it all came from the notebook, and it was all in, scribbled handwriting in different colors and boxes and arrows and all that kinda thing." So that's one of the cool things, that, I look back on, I kinda like that.
Wow. And that's inspiring because I think sometimes when we were told we're not good at something, it felt like, well, I'll never be good at it. And I was told I wasn't good at math, and I wasn't, but then I kind of stopped trying. I just always had this
You
I'm not
accepted
good
it.
at math narrative.
Mm,
And so I stopped. Or I'm not really good at science. I loved science, but when there was math involved, I just kind of shut down instead of keep going. It's amazing how your own brain labels itself as like, oh, you just can't do this. And it's not that there are some things we just won't ever be able to do. But I guess from there, I did lean into the writing. That always came easy. But I wish just because it wasn't easy, I wish I still would have tried harder instead of just living in this, I can't do this when I was a
mm,
kid, you know?
Well, I think Oh, I was just gonna say, I think when you're a kid sometimes, you listen to the voices of people that you trust or like your parents say you can't do this, or maybe your best friend will say, "Give it up, you can't do it." And as a kid, your brain's not trained to think, "You know what? No, I think you're wrong. I can do it." You just accept that as gospel and you go on. But Angela, to your point, I think, if something, is in your heart and you're passionate for it, maybe you might, kinda dismiss it and say, "Oh, you
Yeah.
know what? I'll never be a writer," whatever. But eventually, it's gonna resurface. The flame is gonna be fanned by something, and you're gonna say, "You know what? I want to try that again," because it won't die within you. You have to explore it, and you have to do it. So I think that's one of the great things about the things that we're passionate about. Like for us, it's writing. I could say, wow, I'm going to give up writing or whatever. But I bet you the next day or a week later, whatever, my heart and my brain are going to say, you know what? Nah, you got to keep doing this, or you'll just die. Inside you will die. So I think that's
Well,
yeah.
like you are showing other writers who have dyslexia that what's possible. I hope we have listeners with dyslexia saying, wow, he's doing it. He did it.
Hmm.
He overcame and he solved that problem. Although I will say, I think, having something like that in today's age where there is dictation software and, when we were kids, it was like, okay, you really had to maybe struggle a little bit. That is one blessing about technology is that it can be helpful in overcoming those kinds of things. I'm sure now there's all kinds of math tutorial software that make it so easy for people like me to understand where that just didn't exist back
Right.
then, just
absolutely,
wasn't a
yeah,
part of it. So,
yeah.
but you can do it. And I think that's what we want people to take away. Keep trying, keep doing.
When you do it, it is such a feeling of euphoria to think, "Wow, look
Yeah.
at where I started. Look at where I came from, and look at where I ended up." And it's like, I can take on anything now. And it's, like you were saying, the people that are listening, if you have dyslexia or even if you have any kind of, learning challenges, or if you even have self-doubt or anything, just, if you get over that hump, you will never be the same. Your life is gonna be so much better.
Yeah. I love that. So, one thing I know is that you write romance,
Mhm.
which Angela and I always love to talk. We love chatting about can men really write the opposite gender well, and vice versa. Do we write the opposite gender well? That's up for debate too. So I'm just curious, your viewpoint on what you've learned writing the opposite gender and Has that impacted your relationship as writing romance as the male author? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's funny because I sometimes I don't really feel attacked, but I kind of feel like in a lot of circles, they'll say, "Oh, a man writing romance? Okay, you're going to talk about my heart-shaped butt or my supple breast." It's just it's so funny because I see those stories. There was one last summer where there's a publishing company. There was a startup in England, and he put out a message saying, "I'm looking for male romance writers." And gosh, Angela and Cassie, you would not believe the Facebook comments where women were just bashing this guy,
Oh,
thinking, "Oh yeah, this is going to be a New York Times bestseller for and just all this." And I was just crazy,
no.
going, "Oh my God, I'm never going to make it."
Crazy
Ladies,
because
shame on you.
there is some
Yeah,
stigma, isn't there, being
yeah,
a male
there is,
romance writer? So
there is.
how are you overcoming that?
I
Talk
think
about
there's
that.
there's a couple ways. I think being very thick-skinned, being very understanding, and being very patient because you can't look at it and say, "Oh my God, you're already dismissing me." It's like, well, tell me, why are you dismissing me? Why do you think that a man can't write romance? And let's get their opinion out. And when I hear from them, what it is, then I think that kind of makes me a better writer in a sense of, hey, these are the things that you need to stay away from. These are the things that offend women, or these are the things that are going to take this romance and just, it's not going to be believable. It's not going to be enjoyable. They're going to look at it and say, wow, look at you disrespecting the female race. So I think that's part of it. And
Mm.
so, going into my books, like at the top of the list is write with respect. It's like when you talk about a woman, you
Love
can't
that.
talk about her physical features. You got to talk about her heart, her personality, the things that make her tick, the things that she's passionate about. And of course, being married is a huge help. I can tell you that because my wife, I've learned so much from her as far as these are the things that women go through every day. She's an executive and she does marketing. She's a vice president at her company, and she talks about how she gets slighted every day because in most of the places that she's worked, it's a male dominated workforce. And so I hear those stories, and it's like I have so much empathy for her because I'm kind of going through the same thing with trying to write my stories, and so I kind of get a little bit of an understanding. But I think as long as you write from the heart, you write with respect, and you have all good intentions, I think that's kind of where I start my stories from, and always keep that in the back of your mind that you're writing for an audience, and you have to respect the audience.
Okay, I have so many questions. Well, for one, what were they saying would offend us other than describing what were some of the other things that are supposed to offend women
Yeah,
that
I
you
think
feel?
that well, and gosh, I'm trying to think of how to. Okay, back to the respect thing. I'm trying to think about how I could say this and some of the comments
You
that
can
would make.
say
Okay. So they talked
it.
about how and okay, and I am gonna be because I am trying to be a
Now,
gentleman.
I appreciate, now let's talk about how much you are trying to be a gentleman. And that
Okay,
is not lost on us, and we
No, not
appreciate
at
it.
all.
But
okay.
yeah,
So
you can
here's
let
the
your
thing.
hair down. Let your hair down.
Okay. With little hair, that's fine.
Me too.
They talked about how they would okay, so a man would meet a woman and they would look at each other and immediately they would go straight to bed and he would plunge into her and give her the best orgasm she ever had. And it was like, oh my God, you are the greatest. And I'm like, okay, for some, and I will say
Yeah,
this with all due respect, there are some writers and there are people that love that kind of romance. And not I have nothing against them and all that. It's just not what I do. But in some of the things like with my books and my genre and the audience that I'm trying to reach, I mean, that doesn't, I don't think
right.
that works. Not the story that I want to, but that's the thing. They talk about a lot of the sex part, a lot of the physical part about how, he cupped her breasts and sucked on her nipples and she leaned her head back and just moaned in pleasure and all. And it's like, wow, gosh, and so those things I think that, for some, they crave that. They want that in a story. But with what I like to write and the audience I'm trying to reach, it's just not me. And the other thing is that if it was me, I don't know if I could have my mom read those things. I'm
Exactly.
it's like, how am I gonna, or even my wife, it's like, wow, it's, so anyway, but yeah, that's,
Yeah.
Some of us like spice in our romance and write
yes.
it. But I
Absolutely.
also think that there's a difference between writing a character journey to get
Yes.
to an intimate
Yeah.
Right.
situation.
Yeah.
So I think that's the important variable. And you also write comedy in your romances. You write romantic comedies.
Yeah, that's my favorite. I mean, you have to have a laugh. You have to be able to smile and to giggle and to, those kind of things because I mean, those are the things we look forward to in life. I mean, if I could have, a big teehee once a day, twice a day, or whatever, it's like it's a great day for me. And then when you can mix in a little romance to it, wow, it's like that's a perfect day.
So that's probably how you're winning too, because, well,
Yeah.
women love men who can make them laugh. I still find it interesting that I've read some of the raunchiest, just awful stuff that women have wrote. And it's okay for them to write that. But if a man was writing that, they are like, hey, calling you on it. They were like
It's a
making
very
sure you weren't doing.
interesting
That's
double
an
standard.
interesting double standard.
Yeah.
And
It is.
I think, romance is all about the fantasy. So I do agree that it's about respect, but part of, the early stages of romance is noticing each other's physical features. To me,
Absolutely.
that is science. You are attracted to someone's face shape and height and eyes and, the way things are placed. And that's actually chemistry. And so you kind of have to write that in the beginning phases, that is part of setting up the romance. Is actually the man comments on what he's noticing about the physicalness of the woman and vice versa. But
Yeah.
if you just went and did that out of the gate, it would be offensive. Isn't that interesting? I find that fascinating.
I do too.
Because we want to, I would assume that the romance space is for everyone, but maybe men are having a harder time. Maybe that's not why there's not as many men tackling that genre, even if they wanted to, because there's a little fear there that, so, I mean, good for you for saying, I'm still going to write what I like, and I write that way too. I don't write. I was raised by a conservative Italian mother, and there's always that modesty in me. And
Yeah.
we had just a very modest household, even though it was fun and boisterous. But I don't want to use like graphic words to describe anatomy. Still
Mhm.
writing steam, and actually, I think it's a little more challenging if you can't use certain words. But I feel
Absolutely.
like I've decided my whole thing is making my reader work a little harder. It's not all described for you on the page. You got to use your imagination, or whatever you want to deduce by me saying this sentence. That's on you.
Yeah. Well, Angela, it's great. It's funny that you mentioned that because I go back to the Hemingway example where he talked about when he writes, it's like it's the iceberg analogy where you only see 1/8 of the iceberg and then the rest of it is underneath the water. But you have to imagine what it looks like. Same kind of thing with your readers. You're going to throw it out there, but you want your readers to go down that journey and put together in their minds. It's like, okay, I can piece this together without her, beating me over the head with it. And I think that's one of the great
Yeah.
things. If you could write like that, they're going to love that.
Yeah.
I agree.
Now, Cassie is writing full spice. So,
Yeah,
and she does it
come on.
really well. She does
Yeah.
it well. So
All right.
we're all representing that.
Yeah, and I love that
like
though.
spice, but I like it in certain context. I don't like it just for gratuitous reasons. It has to be a culmination of a character arc or the couple's arc. And there can still be conflict there. I've just learned, because I write short romance right now, that it's almost like a payoff for my readers and my couple to get to that point.
Yeah.
So I just don't shy away from it. But I think I've gotten a little spicier as I've gone. So it's interesting because I wrote some holiday matchmaker romances, and one was a real challenge. It was a couple that was married that was separated, and it was a second chance romance. So I'm bringing them back together. And it wasn't as spicy as my other books, but I felt like that they know each other, and
Yeah.
I don't have to explain a lot. I mean, but that's coupledom, that's marriage, and things like that. So it's really interesting that I was finding myself oh, but that's really how that would work with a couple who's been married for 7 years, you know? So I was just kind of, finding my beats there. But yeah, I don't shy away from it. But as you said, it wouldn't be something in the beginning typically that I would write.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I would have to see what purpose that couple would have for their end journey, because
Hmm.
that's what I love about romance is the happily ever after. I love
Yeah.
even the happily for now, but if you give me a happily ever after, I am
Yeah.
in it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. You
yeah,
gotta have that HEA.
you got to have that
That's a
HEA.
requirement. Yeah.
So, I'm curious too. I know Angela has a lot of questions as well, but as your perspective as a male writer writing romance, do you see any opportunities for shaping the future of romantic comedies right now? I mean, I'm just kind of curious because you are kind of leading the way, Ivan.
Gosh, it's I think all of us in a sense, we'd like to be able to be looked at like a Hemingway or a Fitzgerald because back then they wrote so differently and they kind of
Sure.
their books were that's like the books of the generation. So I've often thought about that and wow, if I work hard enough and I'm lucky and the breaks will work the right way and if I have great support like I'm getting from you guys tonight, maybe one day that might happen. And gosh, that would be yeah, I could leave this world with a smile thinking, "Wow, I left something for the world, that's something good that people can follow and they can look at and they can get enjoyment out of and fulfillment out of." So, wow, what a great question. I love that.
Well, what's
Maybe
a
one day, you're right, for all of us.
yeah. Well, what's advice you would give a young male author who's wanting to write romance right now?
Yeah,
What would that piece of advice be
yeah,
in leading that future?
wow. I think the first thing I would tell them is to enjoy the process. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs, but you have to have confidence in yourself, a lot of self confidence, because there are going to be times when it's like, wow, I can't do this. I'm terrible at this. Nobody's going to ever want to read this. I'm a terrible romance writer. So I think self confidence, enjoying the process, use your eyes and ears more than your mouth. And what I mean by that is that there's so much that goes on in the world, people watching when you're watching couples like in my first book, The Redhead and the Blue Convertible, the premise of the story I got from a news story that I heard about an old woman who called and this is, I guess, years ago before Uber. She called a taxi cab, and this was late at night, and she had her suitcase packed. And so the cab driver picked her up, figuring I was going to take her to the bus station, take her to train station, airport, whatever. So what they did was is that she had him take her to the school where their kids grew up, the church where her and her husband were married, the places that they would go dancing, the church, that kind of thing. And so he was like, "Well, this seems really weird. I don't understand this." So at the end of the journey, she gave him an address, and it turned out it was an assisted living facility. And the story behind this was she wanted one last tour of all the places that were special to her, places with her husband, with her kids, where they went to church, where they spent their Christmases, those kind of things. And so she had one last tour before she had to go to an assisted living facility. And so it got me to thinking, if that were me, where would I go? What would I see? What would I do? Who would I see? Just one last time before my life would change forever. And that was the premise behind one of my books. And so it's kind of a long-winded answer, but the advice I would give is take notice of what's going on in the world. When you see an old couple holding hands walking down the street together, what do you think their story is? Those kind
I
of
love
things
that.
observe, and then sometimes you come up with your best work. You can expound on it and you can take it in a direction that nobody would ever think of. The other thing I would say is you have to be patient, and what I mean by that is that 20 years ago I couldn't write romance. I hadn't been hurt by the world. I hadn't had my heart broken. I hadn't have faced adversity, those kind of things. I mean, obviously the dyslexia, but when it came to the world, those things, it took a while, and now it's like I understand about heartbreak. My father passed away in '96. I still remember that, and to this day, I still feel bad. It still kind of breaks my heart. But I can write about heartbreak now, not just with a parent dying, but in a romance or in a situation,
You
your
know how it
career,
feels.
whatever, or sports, or like in one of my stories, I have a soccer player, and he loses a big game, and he's never gotten over it. So with the years have gone by, I've gained some wisdom and it's helped me to write. So, when you're 30 years old or 35, 40 years old, that kind of thing, be patient, let life come to you, and then try to analyze it. And sometimes that's where you get your best stories from. And then the last thing I would say is don't drink bourbon when you're on your first podcast, because my first podcast, I was kind of nervous and I just released my first book. And so I'm like, okay, I'll just have a little bourbon and just kind of relax a little bit and all that. And guys, by the end of the show, I was just like, whoa,
Oh,
it was just
no.
good. And so I was, you know what, you're trying to sell your books and here you are, getting liquored up and almost passing out on your podcast. So anyway, that was
Actually, I think we should integrate that into.
Hey,
I feel like that's a new feature.
Maybe we'll do Author Next Door After Dark or something.
Yeah.
We'll have wine.
Yes, I love that. I love that.
Get together. I'll bring the bourbon and like I said, I'm going to pace myself. So I'll stay upright the whole time. But anyway, I'm sorry, Angela, back to your question. Those would be the things that I would.
That was Cassie's question. Cassie's question. Oh, sorry. So sorry.
We look a lot alike.
See, we do. All that bourbon and drinking. I can't even tell who's.
No, I love that. That was great.
That's what I would say. Enjoy the process. Be patient. Be very thick-skinned. Observe the world, and you do those things, and the words will flow, the stories will flow, and they'll last forever. And people will enjoy reading them and take a little bit of them and kind of put it in their hearts and in their heads. Never forget it.
Oh my goodness, that's like perfect for embroidery for a pillow, for a throw pillow. And the other thing is if you just go and people watch at restaurants, I've seen so many couples like where I thought, oh, they're on a first date. Just with their body language, you should also actually get a body language book or watch a show on how to read body language because it's fascinating. I used to teach when I was a communications teacher. We did interpersonal communication. I did a whole section on body language, and I really wish I was an FBI profiler. I was so into body language and interrogations. But we have all these micro expressions and different things that fire subliminally when we don't even know that we're doing it.
Right.
And when you go to a restaurant, you can tell when someone's on a first date, but you can also, I'm like, oh my God, that couple's breaking up. And I'm just always like, oh my gosh, I see them. We even had, my husband and I were there, and we're kind of like trying to listen. I'm sorry, that's terrible, but we were tables away, but we were just like eating like, oh my gosh, did she just say that?
What's going
and then
on
she stormed out, and I was like, I was right. And but I mean, I feel sorry for that. Who knows? Maybe, hopefully it was a better outcome for both of them, but you can learn a lot by watching in a restaurant and just go there and be like, spies.
Totally can. Well, real quick, I got a quick story about that. Red and I were on our Valentine's Day. We'd been married a few years, and something happened where she'd gotten mad at me about something, and she was just it was a bad night. So, like you were saying, it might have been you, Angela. I don't know, but there's a couple next to us, and they could tell what was going on, and so like she made a derogatory comment or threw the keys at me or something, and so I looked over at the lady who was looking. She was eavesdropping. She looked at me. We kind of made eye contact. I looked at her. I'm like, just ain't my night, is it? And she kind of like giggled and all that. And that pissed my wife off even more. But I'm like, hey, you know what? If you guys are going to be, eavesdropping or what, I mean, I wasn't upset. I was like, hey, maybe a little bit for your, a little bit of a show for you. Give you your money's worth here.
That's hilarious. Oh yeah, maybe they were putting on a show. Maybe they were like, this couple's totally listening to us. What if we were just bamboozled? I bet you that's what happened. Oh my gosh. So you really are married to a fiery redhead. That's so intriguing.
Yeah, it'll be 20 years in the spring. So yeah, she gives me a lot of stories to work with and all that. Yeah, so we'll get into that, I guess, in a little bit. But yeah, she gives me a lot of material to work with.
Oh, that's so great. That's so great.
I was going to say, maybe tell us a little bit about your books. I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I apologize. This is totally on me. I should have updated my bio. This book is my 7th book. The Redhead and the
Wow.
This released on October 1st. So I'm up to 7 books now, and they're all it's not a continuous series, but the female heroines are all redheads.
I love
Yeah, so
that.
it's like the redhead and the blue convertible, the redhead
You've
and the
got a
ghost rider.
total redhead theme.
We talked about how you capture moments. So in these books, a lot of the stuff that happens between us are stories in the books and stuff. And so one day when I'm not here anymore and she's, living by herself and hanging out with her friends and, and all that kind of stuff, there's going to be books where she can like go back in and read, and it'll be like we're back together again. It'd be kind of like I've come to life because she's reliving some of the memories that we've had together. So no matter what happens, there'll be a little bit of a little piece of me still around in her life, a spirit that she can still kind of feel like, I'm sitting next to her, or we're laughing about something and that kind of thing. And then by the flip side, if she should go first, then I have the books, and if when I'm feeling lonely or sad or whatever, I can always open them up, and it'll be like she's sitting right there, and it's like, oh, I remember when we did this, and the memory will come back to life, and it'll be like she's here. So I think that's part of why I write redheaded heroines, because it's kind of it's something that's close to me.
That.
So is it a different heroine in each book that's just redhead, or is it the same?
Yeah,
It's
it's
a
a
different
different
one.
heroine in each. Yeah. So in the first book, we have a female doctor from or surgeon from London. The second book is a female bartender. Third book is a female pro soccer player. Fourth book is it's a time travel romance.
Oh,
And
I love
she's
that.
works a PR job for the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1955. So writing about 1955 was a blast. I had so much fun researching that one. This one, the next book in the series, The Redhead Who Loves Hemingway. And actually, this is an actual picture of the Scribner's building where Hemingway and Fitzgerald and Thomas Wolfe all wrote their stories. And when we went to New York, we visited the building. It's like a Gap store now, so it's not a
Yeah.
library or a bookstore anymore. But so in this book, Darcy is kind of in between jobs. She's a troublemaker, but with a heart of gold. So you kind of fall in love with her, and she gets the main character in one mess after the other. They're trying to find a lost copy of Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises, and she's responsible for losing it. And so they have the whole weekend to tour around Manhattan trying to find it. So she doesn't really have a career. She's searching for a career. So that's really one of the different characters as far as having a set career. The redhead in the fountain pen is a classical
Love
viol.
that.
She plays the viola. Did I say that right?
I
For the
think,
New York
yeah.
Philharmonic. So she's got that career. So, and then in the Redhead and the Frozen Four, she's a college hockey coach. And so I've varied the careers very much, and hopefully they will strike a chord with somebody that's reading it going, oh my God, I was a hockey coach, or I played viola. So yeah, I
I
try to
love
vary as
that.
much. Yeah.
That's so great. So what's next? Are you gonna just keep writing these romances, or are you gonna switch genres eventually? Or
Well, what's funny is people ask me, it's like, well, are you going to switch genres, or are you going to switch like to brunettes or blondes or whatever? It's like, oh my God. That's a good question. I would love to write a very serious novel that didn't have a happily ever after, kind of like something true. Like we all go through, I mean, we all have our disappointments, and life can be a tough place sometimes. And so I would like to write a book like that. So that's probably in the future. But the next book is going to be a romance / rom-com, and I've already got the first draft written, and it's going to be a love triangle where you have a bookstore owner who is getting bought out by the corporation, and they send a female attorney to try to negotiate and get him to sell, and he doesn't want to sell. Hallmark Channel movie right there. Okay, it's a real. But anyway, so it's a bookstore. The female attorney comes by, and they're trying to buy him out. But here's the kicker to this: it's a love triangle. Death comes to visit him on her vacation, and she comes to visit him because she's like, why do humans loathe me so much? Why do they fear me? Why do they hate me? Can you teach me about life? What is it like to hold hands? What is it like to kiss somebody? What is it like
interesting.
to unlove? And so you got the female corporate attorney, and you have death, and then you have the bookstore owner, and so they're kind of interacting and on. So I don't want to give too much away about.
Really?
But so, and you can imagine, I was talking about research for 1955 Brooklyn. Well, when was the last time you got to sit next to death at breakfast? What would you talk about? What would you say?
Right.
You
Yeah.
really be creative with that and
Interesting.
Yeah.
those kind of things. So yeah, so that's the next book. just to kind of give you a little bit of a teaser.
I do have a question about, I've seen other authors actually printing a dyslexic edition of their books. So is that something that's authors should do if they can? And how is that different to read? I'm just still curious about how that works.
Wow. Angela, that's a great question. I was not aware that there were um, dyslexic books or books for dyslexic people. Is that what it
Yeah,
is?
Sasha, Cassie, a
And
couple of
AP
hers.
Beswick does that, and
Yeah,
I think it's a certain typography or I'm sorry, font type,
Okay.
so that it's sans serif. It doesn't have, like, the little lines that you would normally see in more
Yeah.
Times New Roman type fonts. You would get rid of those things, so it's very smooth. I think there's
Mhm.
more spaces between the
Oh,
letter,
wow. Okay.
mm,
a little bit more leeway. Also, I think between the lines, there's a little bit more space too. Almost like, but not quite, what you would do in a large print for the elderly,
Mm.
but it's not
Yeah.
quite like that because it
Yeah.
doesn't really add, I don't think, additional pages to that extent for like the elderly and like a big visual somebody who's visually impaired. But I do think it adds a couple of pages, but I think there's some real context around the type of font and the spacing of it is my understanding, because people will take their stories and format it into that option and then market it as
Yeah.
such. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's a great point, and thank you so much for bringing that up. I didn't know that this existed. I knew large print, but never
Yeah.
knew that there was a dyslexic kind of print, so I'm gonna have to research this. And I would be more than happy to, because I have to format my own books, and so I'd be more than happy to do something like that. It would be a dyslexic version and I guess,
yeah,
a regular version, whatever. It's not
Mhm.
hard to do. You just have to set the, to a different spacing, and then you just kinda go from there, I would imagine so, but no, thank you for
Yeah.
yeah,
bringing that
You'll have
heard
to
of.
look into it. I don't know. I Mine was the very simplistic version of explaining, but I have not done that either yet.
yeah. And maybe some of those special editions are just, I feel like as we want to be more inclusive to more, readers for us, being open to, especially now when we can print on demand, it's not like you have to print 25 of those and hope it sells. You can just offer it. And then, yeah, I think it's something interesting to look into because I've started to see other authors do that. Yeah, I feel like that
Yeah.
might be beneficial. So, well, the last question I have is you were rejected 303 times. Talk about perseverance. But
Yeah.
what would, if you could go back in time and tell yourself that's just starting, a couple things you learned that you wish you had known, kind of if I had known this then, what would those nuggets be?
Yeah. I think you can't take anything too personally, but
Hmm.
I do. It's like a
But I
punch to
do.
the I
Hello.
But
do.
I do.
It's like I'm like, "You can't do this," and then it's like the other, like the angel and the devil on your shoulder. "No, you can't take it per yeah, you can't take it personally," that kind of thing. Because it's like it's something, as you guys know, because you're writers, it's like this is your baby. This is something you've created. You're attached to it. You're emotional about it. You want to protect it. You want the best things for it. And so when somebody says, it's just not right for my list, or I didn't connect with the characters, that kind of thing, it hurts. It really does. I think for me, I kind of have like maybe it's not so much a 5-minute rule or an hour rule or whatever, but it's like, okay, grieve about it for a little bit and then move on to the next one. Because all you're doing is just wasting time, lamenting that, thinking,
Mhm.
gosh, why didn't you like this? When you could be, writing another chapter to your book, or looking at other agents, or looking at other publishing houses and taking that time to be constructive instead of destructive. So I think that, as I look back on it, it was very difficult, and it hurt, to be honest with you. And still to this day, when I get rejections, if I query an agent or a publisher, it still hurts. It doesn't. I put it in better perspective or proper perspective because I've done it for so long. But I think at the beginning, it's you got to just, it sucks and you hate it, but you got to move on. It's kind of a dead end. So I think that's one
Yeah,
thing that I would carry with me.
keep going. Keep doing.
Yes.
That's how we sign off. That's the only thing you can do sometimes. So,
Yeah.
well, this was such a great conversation. So thank you. There's
Yeah.
one last thing to do, and it's my new game because
Oh
we went through
my.
the table topics. It's Tales Life Story Edition. So we're gonna go with the first question. It goes early life, midlife, later in life. But let's do
Ooh,
the first
okay.
question. Okay, first question is, how did you get your name?
Oh,
Interesting.
Well, yeah, that is a great question. Well, my name or my nickname, because I do have a nickname.
Either. Uh-oh, what's your nickname? Is it safe on
Okay, so
podcast?
my nickname is Scooter. And so when I was a little baby, I would in my diaper, my mom would watch as I would scoot across the floor, and so she started calling me Scooter. So which was fine, and so that was something that she did. Nobody really ever picked up on it. But my freshman year of college, a girl that I was dating, I brought her home for the weekend to meet my parents. And mom she didn't do it on purpose, but she was like, "Scooter, would you like to such?" And she looked at me. She's like, "Scooter, I didn't know you had a nickname." And so then from then on, she told everybody in my fraternity, she told everybody in school, and it just kind of and to this day, all my friends will call me Scooter, and I kind of like it when they do. It's kind of like it's a
yeah.
kind of feel like it's more of a personal touch or whatever. And even in my office, there's a Scott, and then there's me, and so they call him Scott and me Scooter. So they so that's
Oh,
kind of the
that's
difference. So
great.
so even in my office, I can't get away
I
from
love it.
Cassie, do you know how you got your name?
I do. Um, both of my great grandmothers. So I come from a very Irish and Italian background, and Cassie is very Irish, and my
yeah.
middle name is Maria. So very Italian. So I
Yeah,
was named after both of my great grandmothers.
Yeah,
very nice.
yeah. I'm not sure how they settled on Angela. I was supposed to be Jody or Jacqueline. And then, of course, well, my maiden name was Guido. So they were trying to find things that went with Guido, which is really ethnic. But of course, my middle name is Marie. Like, it's either Maria or Marie. That's,
Hmm.
um, and so they just settled on Angela. I don't think I'm named after anyone really
Yeah.
particularly, but they just liked Angela different. So my dad used to call me Mosquito because that was Miss Guido fast, like
Wow.
mosquito. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
I
So
love it.
yeah, so I always remember when he would call me. And then yeah, Angela Marie when I was in trouble.
Yeah.
But
the
Cassie
double
I was a
Maria.
whammy.
pretty good
Oh,
kid. Yeah.
Oh, the
look
double
out.
whammy.
Yeah. The middle name comes out. That's it. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
it.
Well,
you know.
I have to ask both of you guys. I am half Sicilian Italian on my mother's side. My mom is her last name is Lota, Lota, and her parents were born in Sicily, and so I am Sicilian on my mother's side, half Sicilian. My father was a mutt, French and English and Irish and all that, but mom was from Sicily. So we all have that Italian thing,
Hmm.
that bond
Hmm.
together. And one of the things I
Yeah.
learned about when I was growing up with Italians is that, especially like with like my mom's family, they would like argue and cuss at each other in Italian and all that. And it's like, Mom, what's going on? It's like, no, no, that's just how Italian people communicate sometimes. We
That's
get
it.
mad at each other. That's just
Exactly.
how we do it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I mean, sometimes my husband's like, "Why are you yelling at me?" And I'm like, "I am. I thought I was just talking to you, you know."
I
Or
know.
if I get really passionate about something, I just start to get like really animated. And it's just, I don't, it's not like I'm being aggressive. It's just that
Yeah,
that's
me
just
at a
how we
sports
are.
game, look out.
Hmm.
Wow.
It's crazy fun. And
Who
I
are your
get excited just watching TV too and then
yeah.
it's so funny because when my kids when they're grown and flown, but when they were living with us and they were younger, I mean, I would get so excited and everybody would just kind of look at me and I'm like, "What? It's so exciting." Because I feel like I'm in it.
Anyway, thank you for joining us today, Ivan, and listeners. Thank you. Don't forget to give us a review and rating wherever you watch or listen to the podcast. It really helps us with visibility. Next week, new month. Since the nights are getting colder, we thought we'd warm things up with a month of hot topics. So stay tuned. Until then, keep writing, keep doing. We'll see ya.
Thanks for joining today's episode of The Author Next Door. Be sure to like, follow, and tell us your thoughts of this week's episode. Angela and Cassie would love to hear from you.